Welcome on into the Wolverine.com podcast. This is the Maize and Blue Breakdown. Clayton Sayfie here with Anthony Broome. Heading into week 9 of the college football season, Michigan and Michigan State. We're going to break that down, give a little bit of a preview. We'll talk about the rest of the Big Ten and then get out of here with some college football picks from not only the Big Ten but around the country. Anthony, Monday press conference, we got to get Jim Harbaugh, who was tight-lipped, even more so than usual. Josh Ross, who looked like he could have suited up right then and played based on how intense he was. Same with Blake Corum. Little extra pep in the step, you could tell in the building this week. Sean Newell was slamming the podium yesterday. He's an intense guy all the time, but a little pep in the step as well around the Wolverine virtual offices. How are you feeling here just a couple days into game day? I feel like the week's just been crawling by.
I don't know if pep in the step is the way to put it. I'm ready for Saturday. I can say that. This week is always, regardless of how the two teams are doing, what's on the line, it's always a very long week that drags. And there are parts of it that, like today, it's Thursday. To me, that's insane. I feel like there's so much ground to still cover, but at the same time, it's like we're still 2 days away from this football game being played as of this recording. So, like I said, there's obviously a lot on the line Saturday, even without it being the first top 10 matchup in the series since 1964. And everything that goes into this being, I think, either last show or the show before, you and I talked about how that Big Ten East pecking order was going to start to settle itself on the field. It's here. And I think the teams are ready for it. I think the people who cover the teams are ready for it. We wouldn't have jobs if we didn't have to contribute to the discourse and the debate around it. But it's time to settle it on the field, and I'd have it no other way.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. We'll talk about this game more specifically in just a second, but you mentioned kind of the discourse. A lot of that discourse coming out of the Northwestern game, in which Michigan covered the spread, won handily 33-7, 26-point win for the Wolverines, surrounded around the quarterback spot, which was not great in that game when you talk about, trying to be explosive and, being a high-level offense. They leaned on the run game, 294 yards on the ground against Northwestern. McNamara took a couple deep shots, wasn't able to connect on those. One of them, Mike Sainers, still stopped his route early. I thought Cornelius Johnson slowed down a little bit too much on another. But when you're not taking many of those shots and you're not connecting on them, that's going to be kind of magnified a little bit, where it's like, okay, can they do it? Is there a reason why they're not doing it more? He was, completed about 75% of his passes and a lot of dink and dunk, short stuff, horizontal. Now, I will say it seemed like the game plan was dumbed down a little bit, knowing that Northwestern is one of the worst teams, if not the worst. I guess maybe Rutgers is at this point after they beat Rutgers, but in the Big Ten. And so I think that plays into it as well. But at the same time, I feel like it's pretty much a known thing, and many people agree at this point, that the quarterback play has to be a little bit better if Michigan wants to win some of these bigger games. At the same time, I think they can beat Michigan State without, connecting on a few deep balls or whatever. I think they're good enough to do that. I think it comes down to Ohio State. And, people are always going to kind of look at Michigan's season throughout it and compare and say, well, can we beat Ohio State with this? And Michigan's coaches and players have admitted this season they're building towards Ohio State, so that's completely fair for us to do. I don't think they could have beaten Ohio State with the performance they got last week. And, McNamara has done some really good things, hasn't made a lot of mistakes, and all of that. And, it's my opinion at this point that he's probably the best option to start at quarterback. That could change at some point. But I guess kind of where do you fall on this whole thing coming out of a Northwestern game where it feels eerily similar to that Rutgers game in that second half when he missed on a few balls, and then he played pretty well and, hit on a couple nice downfield passes against Wisconsin to really kind of open that offense up. Feels similar to me to that, and I think there's a lot of pressure on Cade. We saw him deliver in Madison against a really, really good defense, better than what he'll face against Michigan State. So, I think there can be some cautious optimism about how he bounces back too.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is, like, we talk about the discourse and how fans have been treating this QB debate. Like, to me, it's truly one of those It's one of those damned if you do, damned if you don't type of things. I think that people are talking about Cade McNamara like he is, what Joe Milton was last year, or what John O'Corn was, or that he's Russell Bellamy. That's this giant anchor to the offense, and they can't get anything done. They still lead. He still leads scoring drives, and that's going to be a huge key on Saturday. Michigan State, they come into this game 89th in total defense, but they're 11th in scoring defense, which all you have to do is look at that and say, okay, they're bending, but they aren't breaking. So the key for Michigan in this game Saturday is going to be finishing those drives with 7 instead of 3. Now, you feel good about Jake Moody whenever he needs to take a kick, but I think when we talk about the quarterback and who's leading the drives, like that's to me one of the biggest storylines in this game. As it pertains to, where do we stand on McNamara versus McCarthy? I don't think that they've mismanaged or mishandled the situation. I think that, there's a very, Cade McNamara is basically what he's been since he came into the lineup. He's someone who comes in. We saw it last year when he came to that Rutgers game. He leads drives. They score points. He doesn't make mistakes. He's poised. The guys seem to rally around him. That's good. Those are all things they brought into this season. And obviously, I don't think they've mismanaged anything because they're 7-0 with a chance to go 8-0. And I think I like what you said in terms of, can it? I'm not worried about Ohio State right now. We can have those conversations, and I think we all kind of know how this story will end in terms of what the East probably looks like at the end of the year. But right now, Michigan just needs to win a football game on Saturday, and I think they can do it with what Cade has given them. Now, what I will say is that I think they have missed an opportunity to get JJ involved a little bit more, and the reason I say that is not only a lot of those wow plays that he's had, and the talent and the arm talent, everything we've seen is incredibly impressive. Like, he's going to be good, and he's probably, we won't handicap the odds now, but there's a good chance he's the starter for opening day next year. But what we've seen on a lot of these wow plays is, and this isn't me hammering him or anything, but a lot of them are the no, yes, okay, well, that worked out type of things. That 4th down play against Northwestern, that was kind of his wow play of the game. He missed his 2nd and 3rd reads wide open in the middle of the field, and he had to scramble around. And the ability to scramble around and find something and make something happen, that's special. And that improvisational stuff is going to suit him well. But I do think, when you look at, he's only attempted, I believe, 19 passes on the year. It does feel like that they have missed an opportunity to, I guess, kind of have their cake and eat it too, because I really think if the goal is to get him playing time and to play him more, have him ready for when his number is called, whether it be Saturday, whether it be 2 weeks from now, whether it be next year, I feel like they had to mix things up a little bit and get him some more throws. And if they were playing him more, I honestly don't think that they would be that much worse off than they are. At least they'd still probably be 6-1, maybe even still be undefeated. So I understand it both ways. McCarthy's still freshman. He's raw. This isn't a Trevor Lawrence situation where you have a generational talent sitting on the bench waiting to play. Now that's going to happen eventually where he'll need to play. But right now, I think if it's not broke, you go with the guy that's gotten you there in November. And really, I consider Saturday an extension of November, given that it's October 30th. Like, whether they've approached this the right way or not, it's going to become apparent pretty soon here.
Yeah, and I think it's a fine line. They've talked a lot about trying to get him game reps and, understanding that they didn't feel like they got their backups enough game reps in years past, but you're still trying to get Cade McNamara comfortable in there as well. He's only started 8 games. This isn't John Navarre in his senior season with 40 starts under his belt and people still complaining, that he is what he is at this point and he's not good enough, and really trashing the guy, from, what I know about that whole situation. This is a guy who started 8 games at the college level and, has done a good job. He's 7-0 in games that he started and not left with an injury, and that's all this year. He started last year against Penn State, and then he came in and won that Rutgers game down 17 points with 35 minutes to go heading into overtime. So this is not a guy that has come in and, lost a bunch of games early, but maybe now he's improving or whatever. He's won a lot early, and he's still early on in his career. So I think it's important to kind of note that too, that they're trying to get him as much experience as possible. And I think they've done a pretty good job at managing it and using now J.J. McCarthy in this role that he's in as kind of a runner, something that Cade really cannot do. It's funny, they ran some design runs for him last season. I was like, okay, the kid can scamper a little bit. Not really. When you see him in some more reps, he's pretty darn slow. And I think he would probably admit that too. His strength is, kind of with, reading the defense, making decisions, and with his arm. And that's completely fine for a quarterback. But JJ adds that element as well. And I think we're going to see a little bit more of him this weekend in that package. It seems like Michigan and Jim Harbaugh have always kind of, in games like this, come out with some more of a package they've run or a new package. Maybe we'll see him throw one or two times when he comes in kind of the meat of the game. We haven't seen him throw a ton in those situations, if at all, really. I think he had one against Nebraska, but he ended up throwing it away, if that's correct, or ended up scrambling anyway. So we might see a little bit of that. Remember Jabril Peppers coming in, playing offense in 2015. I think it was the first time all season Mark D'Antonio had to call a couple timeouts just to get the defense set. So they probably will have a wrinkle in for this game, and we'll see how they approach it. But I think you can pretty much guarantee, barring something injury-wise with Cade McNamara, that he's the starter on Saturday. And, man, all the people calling for JJ to just start him this week. Could you imagine if they started him and then they lose this game? Let's say he makes a couple big mistakes. They lose. Could you imagine the heat on Jim Harbaugh for what the hell were you doing starting a guy, a new quarterback when your other guy just led you to 7-0 and you're the number 6 team in the country? So you said damned if you do, damned if you don't. It just applies for so many things, especially with this situation.
Well, and part of it too is that the knock against Cade is that, he's not the guy. If Michigan goes down or they're in a shootout and they need to keep scoring, he's not a guy that can keep them in the game. And I'd argue that when the bottom kind of fell out for the defense against Nebraska, Michigan had to keep scoring and keep answering. He was able to do that. Probably one of his better games of the season. He threw for 255 yards. Now, the one thing, when you watch this team on the field, I think like for Saturday throws for 129 yards at 4.8 yards per attempt. And I look, and that's to be honest, like that's putrid no matter which metric you put it up against. To me, that's more emblematic of the type of game that's being called. They were Josh Gaddis and that Michigan offense were content to hammer away and take the shorter stuff and kind of give those guys, those playmakers, a chance to, we talk about speed and space, to get outside the numbers and do their thing. When I look at, I think Cade is capable. Like I said, it's not, he's not like some completely pedestrian quarterback. I feel like there is some, I love the way that Jim Harbaugh's put it. I feel like they've left some meat on the bone there.
We've heard that term way too many times now. Everyone's using it.
I know, it makes me hungry was what it does. But coming into last weekend's game, McNamara had completed, I believe, about 55% of his passes against Power 5 teams. He needs to be better, period. Like, he needs to be better than that. Michigan needs to be more efficient through the air. We talk about how Josh Gaddis factors into this. I know they've been dealt kind of a rough hand in losing Ronnie Bell, and then Roman Wilson hasn't been full speed the last couple of weeks, but I feel like the wide receiver development, I don't think we're quite seeing, how do I phrase this delicately? I don't think that's where they need it to be either. So it's kind of like, it's not me letting Cade off the hook. I think he needs to play better. I think they have, quote unquote, left some meat on the bone. In three of the last 4 games, he's had a QBR of around 65 or under. That's that's not going to do it. They need more from him. The problem is that, and it's not a problem. It's a good problem to have, honestly. I really do feel like Michigan's operating out of a position of strength from the quarterback situation. You can go with the guy that got you there, that's 7-0, or you don't have to look. Everyone looks at Kelly Bryant and Trevor Lawrence and some of these other examples from college football where contending teams have made the switch. You don't even have to look outside the head coach. Like Jim Harbaugh before in the NFL did the thing with Alex Smith to Colin Kaepernick. So, and that was, again, it took I think Smith got knocked out of a game with a concussion, and that's what it took for Kaepernick to get on the field. But maybe that's what happens here. I just feel like if the time comes where um, they have to make a decision and they feel like JJ is ready to go, like he'll play. I don't think they're not hoarding him. Like they just burned his red shirt last weekend. So they're not saving him for something. They're not scared to get him on the field. It's just they're really outside of projecting what the other guy behind him could potentially do. Cade McNamara hasn't really done anything to lose the job, and he's led a pretty efficient offense. So, like I said, you want to see some more through the air, obviously, but listen, it's basically November now. Audition time and experimenting time is over. Now, might something change before the Ohio State game? We'll see. There's 4 games to go after Saturday, but in the here and the now, like, to quote Hoosiers, my team is on the floor, so to speak.
Yeah, completely agree. And, it'll be interesting to see how Cade responds, I think, in this game. Again, it's a game where against Northwestern, they didn't have a ton of opportunity. They didn't connect on a couple. You mentioned the receivers. I don't think there's guys running wide open. I'm not expecting them to be Ohio State level where he drops back, doesn't get pressured, and Olave or Wilson or somebody is just running free. But, you just don't see that really. And I think you can blame Josh Gaddis for some of that as well, not only as the position coach there, but also with the things he's scheming up downfield. And I know they didn't want to show a ton in that game, but at the same time, they haven't really shown a ton all season long when it comes to that. But it'll be interesting to watch the quarterbacks in this game. And let's kind of shift into Michigan State. Michigan's a 4-point favorite. Over and under is at 50.5. Feels about right to me when you look at these two teams. Neither team has really played a great schedule. They're both in the 70s right now of strength of schedule to this point. Strength of schedule remaining, they're both in the top 10. So we will learn a lot more about these teams coming up, including this weekend. I think Michigan has an advantage in that they're probably going to be able to run the football pretty effectively. Michigan State could sell out, but they have a suspect defensive backfield as well. I think that's kind of one of the key matchups to look at this game with. And then, man, all eyes on the Michigan cornerbacks who struggled last year, giving up 204 of those 323 yards they gave up through the air came on passes that traveled 20 or more yards beyond the line of scrimmage in the air. So you're looking at guys that are going to be tested. They know they're going to be tested. Vince Gray said on Tuesday, we know they're coming with the deep ball, and we love to defend them now because they're confident in their new scheme. So, man, Michigan State, careful what you wish for. You burned Michigan last year, but now Mike McDonald's in charge. You got Don Brown out of there. So Michigan fans can kind of thank Michigan State for that switch. But that's going to be something. They're going to go right at them, I think. You have Kenneth Walker III there as the running back, nation's second leading rusher, 997 yards, 9 touchdowns. He is leading the country in yards after contact as well. So this isn't a great offensive line, but, man, does he have good vision and balance, as Jim Harbaugh pointed out on Monday, where he just kind of finds his way through the hole, gets hit, and then doesn't fall down and, keeps his eyes downfield and finds open space. So he does a great job at that. But Michigan's got to be disciplined. We've seen really, really good defense from Michigan all season long, except for a few plays, and they've gotten burned. I mean, the 75-yard touchdown run against Northwestern, that can't happen when you have 2 linebackers out of position and a safety who takes a bad angle, or some of those blown coverages on misdirection plays against Nebraska that we saw. That can't happen in this game, especially against a team like Michigan State that not only runs the flea flicker a lot this season, but has run traditionally against Michigan a lot of misdirection plays as well. Throwback screens to the tight end, a wheel route to the running back when they're rolling out the other way, and all sorts of things like that we've seen throughout this series in recent memory. So Michigan's got to be a little cleaner, I think, on defense, a little more consistent, but this is a unit that is built to not give up the big play. This is a Michigan State unit that is built to basically make big plays. I mean, they've got a ton of them over 20 yards and, near the top of the country in yards or in throws of over 50 yards. So they can use the deep ball there with Jaden Reed and Jalen Naylor, their wideouts. So I basically broke down the entire game, Anthony. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, you just threw a lot at me there. I don't even know where to start. I'll say this. When we're talking about how explosive Michigan State has been offensively, this is actually someone on our board sent this. Actually, I don't forget if he DM'd this to both of us or DM'd it to me, but there was a tweet from, and mind you, this was before Michigan played Northwestern, but this is from a tweet from someone whose handle was at LA Bound 2. He said, "There's this revelation considering the offensive narratives on this." It said, "I'm sorry, this is a revelation considering the offensive narratives between Michigan and Michigan State." And he did this little chart of number of explosive plays by yards. Michigan State, 60 plus yards, 7. Michigan has 5. 50 plus yards, Michigan 10, MSU 9. 40 plus yards, Michigan and Michigan State had 12. 30 plus yards, both teams had 18. 20 plus yards, Michigan State had 38. Michigan has 31. So I'm not good at math, so I can't tell you what the averages are, but both of these teams have been a little, State, that's the whole narrative is how explosive offensively they are. But, Michigan's been able to pop a big play here and there as well. Like, we've seen them through the air in the passing game. Obviously, when you run the ball like they do, they've had plenty of them. So it's one of those things where I do think that similar to the Nebraska game, like if Michigan needs to keep up and keep scoring, I think they can do that. And the one thing too is like if you take something we've seen with Michigan State this year is, namely in the games against Nebraska, Indiana, which are probably, those are their two closest calls to this point. When defenses have been able to take away the big play, that offense kind of falls apart a little bit. Whereas Michigan, they're content to take the long way if they need to. They'll hammer you with a 13 play, 75-yard drive, or we've seen drives where they can go down there with 5 or 6 plays. So like Michigan is hardly Ohio State in that regard with how quickly they can come at you. But I think that what we've seen when you kind of look to the margins in a game that is this close with Vegas and the rankings and all that stuff, you kind of look to the margins to see what could turn the tide of a game. So I think that's the biggest story of the game. Like if this Michigan defense, which again, I'm sure that Mel Tucker and his staff will have watched last week's film where I think Northwestern popped a few on them, especially in the screen game. That's a concern for me. I think Josh Ross is going to have to play probably one of the most disciplined games he's played at Michigan. And that goes really for that whole defense, a defensive line as well. I think I would give Michigan the advantage in the trenches, really on both sides of the ball. So it's going to be, as cliche as it sounds, this game will come down to who wins up front. And to me, that's where the discussion on the game starts and ends. It's also with the big plays. And also, again, talking about how you look to the margins for areas where there could be some separation. Michigan State is 117th in penalty yards this year. I think they're around 70.5 yards per game in the penalties, and they average about 2.5 more penalties per game than Michigan does. And the Wolverines, I don't have the number in front of me, but I know that they're the 28th fewest in the country. So, this game is a late hit out of bounds away, or a pass interference down the field, or something away,
or a twisting of the helmet, or a punching in the face of an offensive lineman.
Well, yeah, I think what we might be heading down that road there in terms of who that might pertain to. But those are, it's the slimmest of margins when you look at that. I think you brought up Michigan State's backfield, their defensive backfield. I think that's an area that they could be able to, Michigan could exploit. But I don't know, like when we talk about the trouble with the deep balls and the wide receiver development, are they going to be able to exploit that? That would be the other question I have. So again, that's what this game comes down to me. It's kind of weird. Like Michigan's favored, but I still feel like there's this feeling of Michigan State. We see it in the national media where people are picking them to be the team that gives Ohio State the toughest game, and them being a dark horse for the playoff, and people not necessarily trusting Michigan. Which, hey, given how things have played out the last couple of years, that's all totally fair. But I think that it's a little bit of a role reversal, and then like. I don't think Michigan State wants to get into a bar fight with this Michigan team, because I think that type of game does favor Michigan. And, I think if Michigan can kind of keep them, I think if Michigan can keep the Spartans kind of in the high teens or low 20s in terms of scoring, this is a game I do see them winning and having the upper hand in.
Yeah, it's interesting. I like that saying of kind of look into the margins that you talked about with penalty yardage. I think another one of those margins is third down conversions. Michigan State is 100th in the country, and somewhere in the 30s percentage, I believe, in picking up third downs. And that's going to be huge in a game like this. Something else that's going to be huge in a game like this is field position. In Michigan, I haven't looked in about a week, but they were ranking top 10 in the country when it comes to special teams efficiency. And not only does that factor in with, how you're punting and how you're covering stuff and how you're kicking and how you're covering those, which is huge, and it does factor in, but it also factors in the fact that Michigan has done a good job of not going 3 and out, not getting stuff. They're taking snaps a couple times this year where when Cade is standing in his own goal line, in his own end zone, and they've been able to pick up a couple first downs. Doug Skeen, our analyst here at the Wolverine.com, has said the goal is when you're backed up inside the 5 to get 2 first downs and kind of flip that field position. And I can't remember a time this year where Michigan hasn't done that. So little things like that, the ability to do things like that, are going to be crucial in a game like this. So field position, third down conversions, which are obviously a little bit more important there. And Michigan's done a great job themselves of picking up third downs because they've been in such manageable situations, leaning on that run game that has had just a couple negative rushes all season long. When you look at Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum in the significant portions of these games, they've had a couple later on in the year that really don't mean much when it comes to the overall stats. So things like that are going to play out. I think Michigan, not to use a cop-out, because I think people use consistency as a word that doesn't really mean a lot, and you just say that, we need to be more consistent, or this team's more consistent. But I think Michigan throughout the course of their games has been more consistent, and so there's my cop-out, I guess. But when you look at little things like that, picking up third downs, not going 3 and out, moving the chains, and you mentioned it, when they've been with their backs against the wall in some of these games, that offense stepped up and was able to make some plays against Nebraska when, man, it was such a slow, weird first half against Nebraska. They're up 13-0 at the break. And then Nebraska just comes out, guns a-blazing, couple blown coverages defensively, and then Michigan picked it up. So they have that ability as well to kind of be consistent, but then have a little bit of a surge too. But it's going to be a tough environment. What do you expect out of that? I think there's always a good amount of Michigan fans there, and there's always a decent amount of Michigan State fans in the Big House. But this is such a tough ticket. I expect this to be the least amount of Michigan fans. Maybe this is me challenging the fans there. But the least amount of Michigan fans that I can remember when you look at, going to Spartan Stadium. I was there in 2016, and I think it was about 45% Michigan fans, 40% might be a little much when you think about the student section, 35. That's still a hell of a lot of Michigan fans in there.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be one of the lowest percentages when you look at that, just because of, this is not only their Super Bowl, Michigan State, but their Super Bowl really of the last 4 or 5 years. They haven't had a game this big since 2015 at Michigan, and that was at Michigan. It wasn't at home. So I think there's going to be people crawling all over that place. I'm kind of scared for my life in there, just in that city, because I think there's going to be couches burning and all of that jazz, and it's just going to be a rough day.
Oh, you're playing all the hits today with the Super Bowl and the burning couches. That's
yeah.
I know there is a Twitter campaign for Michigan fans to quote unquote raid the woodshed. I'm not going to despair. I mean, I'm not picking on anyone. It just feels like that's one of those Arrested Development. There will be dozens of us, dozens.
Great.
I
Great
think
line.
it'll probably be. I think it'll probably maybe 20%. I don't know, but I think Spartan fans are fired up for this game. Last year, that game last year being what it was, I think was even as bad as that year was for Michigan State. That was kind of fuel for the fire for you're going to get Michigan at home this year. So I don't think the idea that there's going to be some raid of which I'm not even really a big fan of referring to Spartan Stadium as the woodshed. I don't know where that came from.
Yeah, I think it started with Chris Fry in 2016. I'm pretty sure that's what I remember. And then they've lost 2 straight there against Michigan.
Well,
so
that
I don't
worked
know.
out well. But
yeah,
I'll say this. Selfishly was happy for a noon kick. Not only just because, for you guys that'll be at the game, like you're going to actually maybe get home before the sun goes down. And also, um, just those later nights are rough, especially if it's a night game. But I do think the noon kick kind of favors Michigan in that, there might be a little bit of a late arriving crowd there. Getting off to a fast start is going to be so critical for them. But I feel like this is a group too that like I think they're foaming at the mouth for this Michigan State team and the shot at this team on Saturday. So I think they'd play it at 9 a.m. if they were allowed to. I wish they could. It'd be nice to have this wrapped up by lunchtime. We can move on from there after all the build up to it. But yeah, I think, my understanding was that Madison wasn't all that rowdy. Heard Nebraska was like a pretty good crowd, but I would imagine that this is probably the toughest environment that Michigan will have gone into so far this season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough to beat the loudness and everything in the night game atmosphere at Nebraska, but I mean, I don't think their fans necessarily say the type of vulgar things that you're going to be hearing from the Michigan State fans. When, man, even Juwan Howard at Media Day a couple of weeks ago was like, yeah, I forget what he was talking about, but how 2 classes of his team, freshman and sophomore, haven't played in front of fans on the road before, and how that's going to be a new challenge for them when you look at winning the Big Ten, or at least trying to. And he was like, yeah, you got to go to Breslin Center where they say all sorts of things. And then he kind of stopped himself. But if anyone wants to check out some of the things that him and the Fab Five had to deal with down there, I think the Free Press has a article with some pretty explicit stuff in there. So they're going to be hearing all that and more on Saturday. And you mentioned it might be a late arriving crowd. I seen a push on Twitter for their fans to try to get there early or whatever. But I mean, these are Michigan State fans that love to tailgate and really are more in it for that type of deal than really the game. A lot of them don't even watch the games throughout the season, unlike a lot of these Michigan fans. So I think it's a little different. I don't think they're necessarily all going to be in their seats waiting at kickoff. And you mentioned if Michigan's up 10-0 or 7-0 when they get in there, that could kind of change the complexion of the environment, just like Wisconsin. From what we heard, Chris Ballas was telling us, it's like Michigan, got off to that fast start, or at least within the first quarter or so, scoring and all that. And some of the Wisconsin fans that were quote unquote late arriving just didn't even arrive because they kind of saw the writing on the wall there. I think these Michigan State fans will show up, but maybe not as soon, and won't be as raucous once they do come in if Michigan gets off to a nice start. Anything else on this game before we talk a little bit? Or I guess any memories of the Michigan State rivalry stand out to you? I know that's kind of always fun to talk about. I mean, 2018, Donovan Peoples-Jones there, making the 79-yard catch. Gus Johnson with an incredible call. 2016 was a little more of just like a kind of a beatdown that then they scored a little bit late and it ended up being a 9-point win. There's been some good ones. 2019, I think, was satisfying for Michigan fans, winning 44-10, the late touchdown from Shea Patterson to Cornelius Johnson, because why not, right?
Yeah.
And, so many good memories, I think, in this rivalry over the course of the last several decades. Not as many in the last decade, but you look at Braylon Edwards in 2004, there's been some damn good ones.
Yeah, Braylon Fest in 2004 is the one that kind of like my first real like conscious memory of it. The first, 2007 was one with that. That was a night game. That was a comeback. I think that was a night game. It was either a night game or a 3:30 start with a very dark finish. Given we're in Michigan in the month of October. The first one I ever saw live was whatever it was at the Big House. I think maybe 2012 when they won 12-10. That was my first Michigan State game. Again, memories. I remember 2015. I was there. I remember it very vividly. I've been to every one since then. The 2018.
Why'd you bring that up?
You asked for memories. I'm giving you memories, both repressed and positive. So,
okay. I should have been more specific then, but yeah, go ahead.
No, they're all good memories for me in terms of the experience. But the one that stands out, being on the field for the celebration in East Lansing in 2018, is probably probably a favorite one of mine, just, given what it was and um, all that type of stuff. So yeah, I'll stop there to not, bring up any more sad memories.
Yeah, thank you for that. And there's the picture there for the YouTube people of Michigan celebration, the Devin Bush. I mean, one of the memories that no one really saw live, unless I guess you were there super early, would have been him scraping up the field and Michigan State coming after the Michigan players that were warming up with a stormtrooper march and all that. I mean, that just made that game, I think, so satisfying for Michigan fans as well. And then to follow it up with a home beatdown the next year, I think was really nice for Michigan fans. And hey, they could make it 3 straight at Spartan Stadium, the woodshed as they call it, if they're able to pull it off on Saturday. Other marquee matchup in the Big Ten. Not as marquee as we thought it was going to be a week ago because Penn State lost in 9 overtimes, the longest FBS game in terms of overtimes in history. Of course, 2-point conversions make that a little weird. I kind of hate the new rule. I hate it. It's so stupid that we're deciding a game with 2.5-yard plays, but this is where we're at, I guess, in college football. They lose to Illinois because they can't run the ball and they can't stop the run. And I don't know how Illinois, I think they had almost 300 yards rushing, and they still only had 10 points in regulation. But they were able to somehow win that game. Looked like they had a couple different points. We got the TV turned off on us in the media room because Jim Harbaugh walked in for his postgame, and everybody was a little disappointed. Yeah, he should have waited for the end of that game. Everyone was a little disappointed. Usually we want him to come out as soon as possible so we can get going and get working. Not this time. The entire media, I think, was in consensus there. But Penn State losing their second game in the Big Ten. Now it's basically Ohio State, Michigan State, and Michigan as contenders in the East. But that's still the night game on ABC because they picked it 13 days in advance, and they did not expect that outcome last weekend. That'll be another one to watch. And it'll be nice to see Ohio State get tested at least by one of the better pass defenses in the country. A team that's still competent. I expect them to roll, and they're one of our games that we're going to pick here at the end in just a second. But your thoughts on that at all? And, I feel like Ohio State, they were obviously tested early on in the season with Oregon. Sorry. There's people message me every time I say their name. Oregon is the name of that state. But then they've kind of, struggled against Akron, all that. And then they've just been cruising ever since, and now they're finally going to get tested again. So it's kind of the second half of their season is starting in a way, and we'll finally see them against more of a competent opponent.
Yeah, I mean, well, Penn State, their margin of error was already minimal after losing at Iowa, and then to drop a game like that to Illinois, which again, say what you will about the overtimes, they lost. Period. That's a game that I think they had the same spread that Michigan did. They were 23.5-point favorites. So that's a bad look. And apparently this week, James Franklin is a total space cadet, doesn't know who he's playing, doesn't know if he's even going to be there still. Seems like he's a little bit distracted at the moment.
He said it's not a distraction, though. He said the USC job isn't a distraction. So as long as he said that, it's just not.
Well, as long as he says it's not a distraction,
right?
We should, totally believe him for that. Yeah, I don't see a scenario Saturday where Ohio State just doesn't beat the brakes off of them. I feel like that's a team that's about to fold, which is too bad because I think they have a couple. I mean, they probably have. Talking to Jim Nagy a couple weeks ago, I think they probably have 5 or 6 NFL guys on their defense. Talking about Penn State. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's a team that's about to fade in a big way. Like they're effectively out of the. We've talked about how November was going to sort out the pecking order. They didn't even wait till Halloween to do that. Like they have 2 Big Ten losses. Everyone else has to lose twice now for them to go to Indy. Like I think that a third loss is probably coming for them this week. So yeah, that's what looked to be a marquee matchup. I mean, even then, you felt like Ohio State was probably going to win by a few scores anyways, but that's faded in a big way. And I know a lot of again, going back to State fans, they're upset that that's the night game and this noon game on Saturday should have been there, but it's the way the cookie crumbles, I guess.
Yeah. And Fox got the pick and they're trying to make that noon game their big thing. So it is literally big noon kickoff. So that's how it shaked out. I guess let's just start our picks then. Do you have Ohio State minus 18.5 like I do?
Yeah, I guess we'll do the picks right now. Yeah, I'm going with Ohio State there
Yeah, I
for all
figure
the
we can.
reasons I just listed.
Okay, and then I'm not trying to suppress the facts that Anthony went 5-1 last week. I went 3-3, which is not bad. He's 7-5 overall in the 2 weeks that we've done this. I am 5-7, so I'm not bowl eligible at this point, but possibly could
Still
get
time.
there. What's that?
I said there's still time.
Oh, there's still
Don't beat
plenty of
yourself
time.
up yet.
Lots of football left. So yeah, and we can get into these picks while also kind of talking about the other biggest game in the Big Ten this weekend on the West Division side of things. Iowa at Wisconsin. Wisconsin favored by 3.5. Over under at a just beautiful and very Big Ten-esque 36.5 points.
Ooh.
6-1 Iowa. They suffered the loss to Purdue, who I think's okay, but then maybe they're not actually good. They're just probably okay. In Wisconsin, who's improving and getting better as the season goes on, and now looks like a team that could win the West. And if they beat Iowa in this game, I think they're going to be Undertaker, GIF type of thing, coming out of nowhere, coming back from the dead, and probably will win the West. Your thoughts on this game with Wisconsin being a 3.5 point favorite?
Yeah. Iowa, thank goodness for them that Sean Clifford got hurt a couple weeks ago, because all of a sudden, like, you're looking at a team that might maybe starting to fade a little bit in terms of some of that turnover luck they've had over the last year and a half. Wisconsin is coming on strong. I don't know. Everyone kind of controls their own destiny in the Big Ten West now, similar to the East, whereas maybe 2 weeks ago it looked like Iowa was going to run away with this. Oh, this one's difficult. I think I'm going to go with Iowa in a bounce back game here. I'm not correct. I mean, I think Graham Mertz threw like 10 passes last week, something like that. It was a super low number. I feel like Iowa will return to form and find a way to get a win on the road.
I'm so torn too. I kind of think that Wisconsin's going to win weirdly, but I think Iowa, I'll just take the points because, like you said, I don't think a lot has been fixed necessarily with that Wisconsin offense. Maybe they've just found, a couple different ways to win games. And Iowa still is a pretty good team, in my opinion, and I'll go with them here to at least cover that 3 points. But, man, it's kind of a toss-up, and I think it's going to be low scoring and probably pretty boring of a game. What time's that one at? We're looking at noon with that one as well. So that'll be one that I don't have to watch, and I can just look at the score of during the Michigan game, which is kind of nice. So that's not bad.
There you go.
Let's move outside the Big Ten to Virginia at BYU. I'll be completely honest. I don't know much about either of these teams. I just feel like I'm going to take the home team, BYU, to 2 point favorites.
Okay. I'm going to go the opposite. I also don't know a ton about either of these teams, but I think Virginia has a pretty good passing offense, and that's fun to watch. So I'll go with Virginia.
That's fair. Georgia in Florida. This one's in Jacksonville, right?
I believe so.
Yeah, so neutral site, Florida is 14-point underdogs to the number one team in the country. I feel like it's just going to stay within 14. And I think I'll take Florida to cover, but Georgia to win by probably 13.
Okay, yeah, I think Georgia they are the number one scoring defense in the country by like a whole touchdown right now. I think they give up like 6.5 points per game.
I think it is.
I don't think it will be that easy for them, but I do think that they will win. However, I have Florida covering as well. So,
okay, and then Notre Dame hosting North Carolina, 3.5 point favorites for the Irish at home in South Bend. I'm going to take them. I didn't believe in them against USC. I think I picked USC outright, and that was a mistake on my part. This is a Notre Dame team that somehow has one loss, and they have been close to losing. Like, they could be 2-4 right now or whatever their record is. Like, they have been that close to being bad, but you got to give them credit at some point for winning close, and they've been better, in my opinion, than North Carolina has, so I'll give them the edge here.
Yeah, I'm going Notre Dame here as well. North Carolina started the year ranked in the top 10. Sam Howell started the year as potentially the number one quarterback for next year's draft. And I don't see neither of those things are true anymore. So I think that Notre Dame will win this game and probably win it fairly comfortably.
And then we'll have our staff picks coming out for Michigan and Michigan State on Friday morning. So check out the Wolverine.com for that. But Anthony, any thoughts on maybe the over-under or the spread, which way you're leaning? I'm leaning Michigan to win this game. And I think we already, the listeners can kind of tell that based on the way we were talking about it earlier. But, man, I think it's one of those toss-up type of games. I think Michigan State's going to have a hell of a shot to win as well. I actually am predicting that the over hits here. I think people, the under is hit 4 out of the last 6 times against Michigan State for Michigan. But I kind of feel like these defenses are going to get exploited a little bit. We'll see about 60 points of scoring in this game. So in terms of how the game's going to go and flow, I think that's how it's going to be. There's going to be some more scoring than a lot of people are predicting. And, Michigan State has a susceptible secondary. Michigan's hasn't been tested a ton, and Michigan State's got really good receivers and a good running back. I think we're going to see some points.
Yeah, I mean, I've been telling people under all week when I look at the point totals. I just feel like this is a game that everything screams over, but there's something about it that I feel like we have a slugfest on our hands, and it might be something that's closer to, what that like the 2018 game was, which was, I believe, 21-7 Michigan, or like, I don't think Michigan will win by that much, but I think for me, if I'm someone who's betting this game this weekend, I'm keeping a pretty close eye on the under, just because I feel like both of these teams, I think it's going to be tight throughout the first half, and I don't think there's going to be a ton of scoring early on.
Lean in Michigan for the win as well.
I am. I think it's one of those games, like, it'll be one score game. I wouldn't be surprised if something we've talked about a few times with Jake Moody this year is how he envisions hitting a game-winning field goal to beat one of their rivals. And it's usually been Ohio State that they talk about, but I wouldn't be surprised if Saturday's a 17-16 game that Jake Moody has to bail them out of at the end. That's not my official pick. Just saying, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw that.
I can envision that. I don't know. I think he's said Ohio State before, but I think I could see it being Michigan State, and could be this weekend. And, man, is there another kicker in the country, maybe there is one or two, that you'd rather have going into a tough environment? We've seen what he's done. He's clutch. He's cool, calm, and collected. So it could come down to Jake Moody, the guy that we haven't talked about for the entire podcast, but is a key weapon and actually leads Michigan in scoring this year. Could be the difference in this game. So stay tuned at thewolverine.com for all of your pregame, in-game, and post-game coverage. We got you covered. Anthony will be right here on this YouTube channel following the game for the post-game show, live, taking your questions, reacting. We hope it's a Michigan win. And no matter when it is, if you type in thewolverine.com in your browser, you will find us at thewolverine.com, whether that's Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. Just type in thewolverine.com. You'll be able to follow all of our coverage, and we'll see everybody over there.